Just once in a lifetime, a man knows a moment, one wonderful moment, when fate takes his hand. And this is my moment, my once in a lifetime, when I can explore a new and exciting land. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, yeah, that song, a lot of folks have sung that song through the years. It is actually one of my favorite songs, and it brings to mind, especially when you get to the end of it, and as a singer, you like, thank you very much, which is the title for this message. It brings to mind shades of Elvis or other Vegas performers maybe, and I'm wondering, just by show of hands, how many of you have seen Vegas shows where performers say, thank you very much. Anybody actually see Elvis live? Anybody? What about anyone else? Any other great of the greats, like I don't know.
Gladys Knight. Yeah.
Gladys Knight. Woo!
Herman's Hermits.
Herman's Hermits. Okay. Hey, we gotta, yes.
Frank Sinatra.
Oh my
God. And Sammy Davis Jr.
Yes, I knew it would happen. I knew there would. Yes. Ella Fitzgerald. So I love Ella, but that was the one that I was looking for. Sammy Davis Jr. in particular.
Yeah.
Sammy Davis Jr. is an inspiration for me. He is an inspiration for many people. He lived an incredible life, much too short, but an incredible life nonetheless. Born in 1925 in Harlem to an African-American father and a Cuban African-American mother. And he was actually very proud of his Latino heritage, but he understood the difficult politics of the era in which he existed and often told people that she was Puerto Rican so that there wasn't the resistance to her Cuban heritage. Very interesting man. He, of course, he served in World War II, and then he came back to performing with his father and his uncle in the Will Maston Trio. Unfortunately, in 1954, as many of you know, he was in a horrible car accident that almost took his life, but it did take his left eye, which became, oddly enough, he wore a patch for the first year, and Frank Sinatra said, don't do that. Let the scar of that and glass eye and all that be a reminder, a trademark, part of your heritage, your personal you that you take forward. He converted to Judaism in 1960. He had an interracial marriage with Mai Britt in the 60s when it was still illegal. They were forbidden from staying in certain hotels, even entering certain states, just turned away. In fact, actually at the Kennedy inaugurals, Sammy Davis Jr. was not able to appear at certain ones of them because of the strong Southern contingent that objected to his interracial relationships. He was faced with many different struggles throughout his life, including squandered wealth, tax problems, and drug addiction. And he managed to still remain Sammy Davis Jr. And he still remained very grateful for all of the gifts that he was able to bring forward for people. And of course, as I mentioned, he died much too young in 1990. I believe he was 64 at the time. And he's the person I first heard say those words, thank you very much. And you take in, as a performer, a young performer, you take in the whole picture of what an entertainer is. And you look at that moment when they get to the end of the song, they're standing up there, and then the applause happens, and they thank the audience. And you have to wonder what's going on in the performer's mind when they thank the audience. Is it just a throwaway? Is it just, oh yeah, I gotta do that? Or is it something a little bit deeper? Again, as a performer, spent a lot of time with other performers and musicians. Yay! Musicians, love them. And we'll go to the acting studio in New York for a quick second here, just to get a little bit of dive into the actor's mind and the whole concept of applause. Applause, there was even a musical written about applause. Applause is that recognition. It is that affirmation that you've done something. It means something very deep to the actor, and it goes to all kinds of places. It was very interesting. I did a show once where we actually not forgot, it's a long story, but we ended up without having a curtain call for some reason. And the company of actors was just, what do we do? What? We were lost. So we made it up. We stayed out there and we just made it up. We looked at each other and made sure we bowed and, got our moment in the sun. I remember also in another show, we reworked the curtain call like 19 times because we wanted to get it just right. And why did we want to get it just right? Not for the audience, it was for the actors. So applause is a meaningful thing, recognition, and the gratitude from an audience is a very meaningful thing. And I'm not talking about, Ava Perón standing up there like, yes, love me, love me, love me. It does something inside of the actor's mind. It's not just a matter of it being nothing. It's not just a throwaway of some kind. On one level, just getting a little bit more specifically into gratitude, on one level, gratitude is painfully simple. Having and giving gratitude, it acknowledges the important influence of the world and the people around us and our experience of life. But when we look at how we receive gratitude, not necessarily actors, but how we receive gratitude, things can get a little bit more complicated. Now, one might ask, why bother even looking at how we receive gratitude? But I think it's important to ask this question because, like with an actor, gratitude, just like an actor with applause, gratitude is a relationship. It's not just about how we express gratitude, but also about how our way of looking at the world compels us to actually express that gratitude and why. So like any relationship, it involves both the give and the take, and those roles can go back and forth quite a bit. It's interesting too that, like any relationship, we can also have expectations around gratitude that influence how we express it and why. Now, if you've ever done or offered something to someone that was out of the ordinary or above and beyond, and you've ever been annoyed by not receiving recognition or acknowledgement for what you did, you were probably carrying a little bit of an expectation based on gratitude. Or if you did something and then received recognition, but it seemed somehow not enough or inadequate, again, that is a gratitude-based expectation. So let's say you do some fantastic piece of volunteer work at the church. You go above and beyond in effort and you take the time to make it the absolute best that it can be, and in the end it is hugely successful, but then no one actually says the magic words to you, thank you. How do you feel? Every performing artist knows that when you've put your heart and soul into something and put yourself on the line, it's deeply satisfying to hear the applause and to see the response of the audience. The sound of silence is deafening. So there is a deeply rooted reward expectation in our culture that influences the gratitude relationship. Now, this, in one way, it might seem deeply flawed, but I'd argue that it's actually very correct. We are reward-based creatures. More and more studies are seeing the parallels between human behavior and that of how exotic animals are trained. So regardless of how you feel about Shamu being in captivity, the technique that is used in training the beautiful creatures at SealWorld is one of positive reinforcement. And it's accompanied by ignoring non-compliance. Humans respond to this as well. If we reward positive behavior and ignore negative behavior, we see powerfully positive results. But then the question remains, how do we how often do we actually sit up and say, gosh, it feels really good to be praised? Right? Wow, I can't wait to be acknowledged. Oh, am I going to get thanked yet? There's a part of us that doesn't want to admit that it feels good to receive gratitude. We think that it's somehow ego-driven or prideful in a bad way. And that this desire for gratitude is something that we shouldn't have. It often gives us some degree of guilt. So we've learned through a history of punitive theology and a rhetoric of sin that we shouldn't desire gratitude. Yet we live in a culture that chastises us when we don't provide it. From the Bible, Proverbs 16:18, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. So what is it then that drives us to offer gratitude while also resisting the acknowledgement of when it is offered to us? Another actor aside here, in the 1950 movie All About Eve, there's this character, Addison DeWitt. He's played by George Sanders, and he offers any number of highly quotable lines. And one of my favorites is this one about the ego of the actor. He says, "We all come into this world with our little egos, equipped with individual horns. If we don't blow them, who else will?" If you're unfamiliar with the movie, you might want to go out and try and see it. It is full of beautifully overblown personalities and egos and wall-to-wall Betty Davis, and it really does deserve its place on the Best Picture list. Basically, I agree with Addison DeWitt. We are all very capable of blowing our own horns, and we should be. But I would also argue that the people who love and understand us will happily blow those horns of appreciation, and they will often blow them better than we ever could have ourselves, if we allow them to. Our greatest challenge can sometimes be finding comfort with handing those horns over to others and simply sitting back and listening to the music. Gratitude, like any relationship, is most clearly seen as a reflection. It is a reflection of how we look at the world and how we look at ourselves in that world. Simply put, our ability to see ourselves as valuable and deserving is an essential part of the gratitude relationship. No healthy relationship is possible without a sense of self-worth. If we cultivate a healthy sense of self-worth in ourselves, we can better recognize the same qualities in others and the world around us. We want to acknowledge this, and we want to have it acknowledged. And that is good. So I'd like you to play a little game with me. And it's actually, no, I shouldn't call it a game. I'd like you to try a little exercise with me. I'm going to ask you to actually, and wait for it, please. I'm going to ask you to offer gratitude to someone sitting next to you, just one person, all right? I'm going to ask you to say, thank you for being in community with me, but I want you to wait. If you're the person receiving this, I want you to wait, take it in, receive it, silence. I want to hear the silence of reception, of receiving a good word. And then the person who received the gratitude, I want you to offer the same back to them. But I'll tell you when to offer it, because I really want to dwell in that silence for a little bit. Okay, I know how you are. Y'all want to talk. So when you're ready, I'd ask you to turn to a neighbor and simply say, thank you for being in community with me, and then we'll wait for the silence.
Thank you.
Okay, it's the other folks' turn now. Thank you for being here. Okay. So that feels a little different. It might feel a little awkward. It might feel a little unusual, unplanned. So often we want to say thank you very much right back. We want to say, we want to have some part in it, but you already have a part in gratitude. You've already prompted it in the other person. There's nothing else you need to do. Just receive it sometimes. There's so many different ways that we show gratitude. We've been talking a lot about it among the ministers in the wisdom circles and all this talk about gratitude. I like to really focus on one specific element of it, and that is living our truth. Living as honestly into who we are every single day. And I feel like Sammy Davis Jr. is someone who brings me back to that. And so the other reason I bring up Sammy Davis Jr. in this idea of receiving gratitude, it's not just because of the incredible career and the accolades and the thank you very much, all that. At the end of his career, someone had the bright idea to do a 60th year celebration of his years in the entertainment industry. And sadly, at that point, Sammy Davis Jr. had started to succumb to throat cancer. Imagine having that voice, not being able to share it. And you watch this program, I challenge you to go ahead and watch this YouTube program. People are just gushing forth with their gratitude. And what's so remarkable is that when it came time for him to give that final, because he died shortly after that, the time for him to give that final thank you very much, all he could do, and it was the perfect thing, all he could do was receive. And though it may be just once in a lifetime, you're